Hey everybody, we are back again. My favorite guys to talk about dog training, Damian, Shane, and my hubs Ray. And we're here to talk to you probably about one of the most common things that we see in dogs is fear-based behavior or fearful dogs. So that we're going to jump right in and get started. And Damian, I'm going to kick it over to you. Let's talk about what causes fear in dogs.
So there can be multiple causes. First of all, you can have a genetically fearful dog, a dog that's naturally anxious. And you can also have a dog that's been underexposed, just hasn't seen the world in the right way. That can absolutely cause fear as they're unsure. Dogs have fear periods in their life where they kind of learn, and that's a survival thing, right? In the wild, it's good to know what to be afraid of and what not to be afraid of. And so they go through these fear periods, and certain things can happen during those times that can cause fearfulness and anxiety and things like that. So, bad experiences, underexposure, genetics, a combination of those things can all cause a dog to be fearful.
Yep. Damian, have you seen any other things that lead to fear? And let's maybe clarify for dog owners the difference between fear and anxiety, because I think sometimes they get lumped one and the same.
That's a good point, though. Like, there is a difference between fear and anxiety, and yeah, they can have both, and they can exacerbate each other for sure. But there is a difference. Fear is like fight or flight. I fear for my safety, and I want to run, and if I can't run, I'm going to fight, or So, whereas anxiety is just like a hyper awareness of everything and a readiness to be, overstimulated and readiness to be afraid, though they are different. You can have an anxious dog who's not that fearful, and you can have a fearful dog who's not just sitting there worried about every little thing. It's just has these few things that it's very fearful of. So though they oftentimes do go hand in hand, they absolutely don't have to. And I've seen plenty of anxious, like truly anxious dogs that aren't really that fearful. And I've seen fearful dogs that once we get them going, you don't really see any anxiety. And they present differently. So anxiety oftentimes will be a lot of pacing, will be drooling, will be neurotic behaviors as they're trying to self-soothe that anxiety. Whereas fear is oftentimes cowering, fleeing, shaking, those types of things like that. So I think understanding the difference is important, and understanding that they may go hand in hand, but not necessarily.
Talk to me a little bit about, I guess, a training strategy when you see a dog that is fearful. And some of the considerations you got to kind of put into play to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, again, even if a dog's not truly aggressive, fear is one of the major causes for like a bite, right? Because the dog is scared. So first, we got to be safe. We got to be safe as trainers or handlers or owners. So when we first start training, if this dog has bit out of fear, or I really think that is a possibility, then we're going to start with some muzzle conditioning and different things like that, because it's not going to help anybody if this dog is successful in reacting the way it wants to react to fear. So safety first, making sure that we protect ourselves and we protect the dog, and that the dog is also a flight risk, right? So again, making sure that we have things in place, double leashes or double barriers, things like that. So that's like kind of the first thing. And then we also need a way to counter condition the dog. So we need a way to reward the dog, and oftentimes, just like in fear, dogs don't want rewards, right? So we need a way to have a very high value reward. So, existential feeding is a big part of that, because it's going to help that dog understand the value of the reward, and that's going to allow us to kind of counter condition the dog. So I think relationship is key, being like, hey, this dog needs to be led and shown, and I can't just coddle the dog. I've got to build the dog up. So making sure that we have a way to reward the dog. My first thing is like existential feeding. If the dog's not super food motivated, I'm going to make sure everybody's safe. And then once we get that going, it's kind of similar to any other training. First, I'm going to create a communication system so that I can effectively communicate and tell the dog what they need to do. And then I can get them closer to the triggers and start counter conditioning them. So I think the major difference is just the safety we're going to put in place. And also remember, I think I mentioned this before, that you can't learn algebra when you're running from a bear. You do need to get them in a place where they're not completely shut down, and that takes time. So when I get a dog in for a board and train that's truly fearful, we need an extra week or two just to get them to a place where they're going to trust me. So time is another factor.
Yeah, that I think that was the biggest thing I wanted to find out. I mean, it just to be able to get the dog's trust, to be able to, that's going to take so much more time, because you're literally moving at a snail's pace, trying to build that trust. I think another important factor when analyzing, a dog with a bite history is I always ask, did the dog bite and hold on, or did the dog, or were people did the bite and run away, or did he bite multiple times? Because I think body position also kind of gives it away too. When you've got a dog that's kind of chest forward and coming at you, there's that dog is intent on causing harm. The other ones are just trying to create space so they can get away from what's causing them fear. So I think those two could be misread also. And a lot of people out there think, oh, my dog's protecting me, when they're in that kind of back on their haunches, barking and snarling and doing all that stuff. And they are not chest forward. That dog does not want to be there. We see it a lot when we evaluate patrol dogs out there. But for dogs that want to be there, it is a very, very different picture. And, when you see that picture, now you have a whole different can of worms to deal with. But that being said, how do you deal with getting muzzles on dogs that don't want to have a muzzle on?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I like to have multiple points of contact. Like I use actually I use our treadmill, so I don't run it, but I put them on the treadmill multiple lengths so the dog can't turn on me. Ultimately, my ultimate goal in training is to get a dog to condition a muzzle, right? If I can. But sometimes we have to get the muzzle on to even start doing that. And so the idea isn't to corner them or to try to force it on them, right? We're going to put them in a position where they can't tag me. And then I'm going to slide it over, strap it on, and then they're in a position where they're safe. They can't run away. They can't fight, but they're also not cornered, right? It's not like I'm just pushing them back into the crate to get their muzzle on. That's one really good strategy. Like I said, if you got a dog who happens to be super food motivated, even out of fear, even in fear, then you might be able to work it the other way. But just making sure that you have a system in place. I like to have multiple points of contact. Like I said, I'll have 3 leashes attached to the overarching thing. So I put myself in a situation where the dog doesn't feel trapped, but I know that if it goes bad, that I'm going to be safe, but the dog's going to be safe. Dogs, when they're truly afraid, they will do some crazy stuff, alligator rolling, like they'll hurt themselves trying to get away. So we need to make sure we're in a situation where the dog can't do that. And I really find that if you have multiple points where the dog can't turn one way or the other, and you're not cornering them, that's your best option. Another big one, if you can, have someone else there. Anytime you're dealing with a situation like this, have backup. You don't want to be there alone for multiple reasons. Number one, if something goes bad, you want some help, but also they're going to be able to read the dog a little different from a different angle, help you read the dog. So I think having some support and then getting in a situation where the dog doesn't feel trapped, but you know that you're safe, is a really good way to do that.
About avoidance signals, and when you've got a fearful dog, dogs that don't want to be there usually emit some kind of signals or some body language, posturing, and things like that will tell you that whatever aggression that you're seeing is not, it's more of a fear in nature. What are those signs? Because I know it gets misread a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. So some common obvious signs are like backing away, turning their head away, things like that. Running away. Those are obvious avoidance, but there are some that people don't necessarily recognize, and they go hand in hand with what's called displacement behaviors as well. So a dog in avoidance will offer up displacement behaviors, and those can be things like sniffing the ground, scratching, itching, even whale eye, licking lips, all those things. So basically, if your dog looks like it's trying to just avoid you and do something else, whether that's literally sniffing the ground or backing away, that dog is trying to avoid this situation, and it's offering up a different behavior to do so. So, sniffing the ground is a big one. I see a lot of that where that dog's, especially in like sport work, where you're like, that dog's in avoidance. It looks like it's checked out, but no, that dog's just trying to say like, oh, I'm pretending you're not there. If I just sniff the ground, everything's okay. So just, being aware of that. And if you're not educated on that, there's a lot of great information. If you're not sure what your dog's doing, ask somebody who knows, and make sure you're really reading your dog, because it can be a dangerous situation when a dog's in avoidance and we don't realize it.
Yeah, that is such a good, and some dogs will actually throw obedience behaviors sometimes. Just a little fun aside, my dog Luna, that we started this company in honor of, used to throw paws. So it's important to work with a trainer to understand and identify when your dog is doing that sort of thing. And I wanted to expand a little bit on a question that Ray asked earlier when we talk about a fearful dog becoming aggressive. I used to tell clients it's kind of perceived aggression because they're not necessarily, as Ray said, that chest forward in it to win it, wanting to really eat the man. Let's talk a little bit why fearful dogs can become, quote, aggressive or display perceived aggressive behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. So the major one is no matter how fearful the dog is, if you, excuse me, if you got it cornered, it has no other option. If it's trying to run, it's going to fight instead if it can't get away. So that's the major one. Reactivity is a huge one. So that looks aggressive, right? The dog is at the end of the leash sometimes, not always even backed away. They're sometimes at the front of the leash barking, but that's just because they're saying, hey, get out of here. I want to create space, right? When we talk about a defensive dog that feels threatened or is in defense, that is them saying, here's the line, get back. I don't want anything to do with you. And so that's the big one. I get a lot of reactivity out of fear, and they're always saying my dog's aggressive on leash. To me, aggression is like, I want to chase and get that thing and kill it, right? Like, it's not just I'm dominant. It's like, if I got loose from here, I'm going to actively go at that dog or person or whatever it is. Whereas reactivity, if that dog could get off the leash, it would, fearfulness reactivity, if that dog could get off the leash, it would run away. So the dog's trying to create space when it's reacting. Also, it could be a learned behavior. If this dog's fearful and one day it does bite somebody and that takes away and that person runs away and it creates the distance, then that dog's going to learn, hey, you know what? When I get scared, if I bite somebody, it creates the distance, right? So making sure that the dog isn't successful in those situations is really important. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier with reading your dog, not getting in a situation where the dog is cornered or is in weird avoidance or displacement behaviors, and then we still press on. So they're just trying to create space, and they either think by getting loud they're going to do that, or they've been successful in the past, and now they're just going to keep doing that because dogs just look for their advantage. So if they think it's in their advantage to bark or bite, to be safe, they will.
I can see this like almost vividly. Chihuahuas. Man, when they amp up or they've nipped you once, man, they've got you, because now they know this is my MO. This is how I get you out of the house. This is how I get you off the couch. This is how they get everything done that way. In this day and age, as humans, I think we over medicate ourselves. But then I hear a lot of people out there that go to a vet and they start prescribing basically anti-anxiety meds to fearful dogs. Talk to me a little bit about, I guess, drugs and dogs, and when we're talking about fear, what does this look like, and when is it appropriate, when is it not?
So I think medicating your dog for just because it's afraid is never the right answer. Now, there may be other things, right? Anxiety, like I said, those go hand in hand often, not always. But if your dog has a true genetic anxiety and then that exacerbates the fear, then perhaps after training and we realize, hey, that whatever's left over is genetics, maybe this dog does need some medication, right? But anxiety medication does not help with fear, right? It helps with that anxious feeling of what's going on around me versus I know what's going on around me and I don't like it and I'm scared of it. So I don't think medicating a dog for fearfulness alone is ever the right answer, because that's not what the medication's for. So for me, it's about making sure we understand what the dog needs. If it's just fearful and it's a learned behavior and it just hasn't been exposed and over time you can create a confidence, then there's no need for that. But if you're working with a fearful dog and then the dog's doing well, you're moving along, but then you see that anxiety is there, then perhaps medication could be the answer, but only after we've exhausted other avenues and never for just fearfulness.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. And I know we've been circling on this question, but I thought let's lay it out for anybody who's watching or listening to this. So they realize they have a fearful dog. Let's give them a step-by-step what to do. And I will say the very first obvious one is get a trainer. But Damian, what do you advise dog owners to do?
Yeah, to get a trainer, first of all, is your best bet, right? So what I'll tell you, I think it's kind of important to note the few things that they shouldn't do, right? So there's a lot of things we can do to help them, and we'll definitely talk about those. But a few things you shouldn't do that are big mistakes people make in those moments is shield the dog all the time, take away pressure all the time, every time it looks fearful. Because what that teaches the dog is this state of mind, being afraid, is what makes pressure and stress go away, right? So it's just going to reinforce that. So when the dog gets scared and we pick them up and we run away with them, we're teaching them, yeah, when I feel like this, everything goes away. So I'm going to reinforce this, or that is reinforcing that. So if I get pulled or if I get scared, stress goes away. We don't want that, right? Also, exposure therapy isn't good either, right? You don't want to take that dog out to whatever it's around without the proper training, without creating a mutually exclusive position, without knowing how to counter condition the dog, without having clear communication. You definitely don't take that dog if it's scared of loud noises, to Home Depot where they're moving the forklift around and stuff without being able to work through that, because all you're going to do again is reinforce it. The dog's just going to sit there and rehearse being afraid. So those are the two major ones that I see. What you can do, first of all, is build a relationship based on leadership. Stick to the no free lunch policy. That's another one. So people hear that and they're like, but my dog's scared. The no free lunch policy isn't about withholding anything. It's about them working for those things. And the reason we need that is that creates value in the reward. Without value in the reward, we can't help this dog. So making sure that we still have structure, because again, we don't want the dog to be able to choose how to turn pressure and stress and fear off, because it's going to choose the wrong thing. And if it's allowed to do what it wants, it's going to, right? If it gets scared of people every time that delivery guy comes and he gets to run and cower, it's just reinforcing that. So not letting the dog choose how to turn that stuff off is really important. Again, making sure we have a reward that we can use, and then appropriately stressing the dog. We get a lot of people are like, this dog's had a terrible life. We rescued him. He's scared of everything. I'm never going to let anything ever touch him again, pressure wise. And it's like, that's impossible. Pressure is going to happen. Stress is going to happen. So you can't shield them. You can't overexpose them, and you can't shield them either. However, there's a lot of nuance to it. So unless you're very savvy with dog training, make sure you get a professional to help you.
Yeah, there's a couple other things that I can think of right off the bat that people do and they don't even know they do. Especially little dogs, when they're afraid or whatever, they pick them up, or they touch them, or they tell them in their whatever soothing tone it's okay, and they pet them. So when the dogs lighten you up, they're petting them, saying, "No, he's okay, it's fine." And again, they don't even know that they're saying, "Hey, you're doing an amazing job barking at this guy. Keep being afraid of him and keep barking." You know what I mean? So it's learning how to speak dog. And I think that's probably the best way to describe what trainers do for people. They just help bridge that communication gap, because they think they're communicating in one way and really it's not the appropriate one. In fact, some of the time they're sending the behavior into a spiral and making it worse.
Absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about, so we talked about the incremental training when dealing with fearful dogs, but what happens if somebody's just impatient or inexperienced in training fearful dogs and they push it too far, too fast? What could you expect to see?
You're going to see the dog spiral. You're going to see the dog actually go deeper into the fear. So, and learn, and basically you're going to lose advocacy for that dog too, because you put them in a situation they cannot be successful at. And so they're going to look at you next time you ask them to do something like, no, I don't trust you. Last time you put me in this situation and it went downhill fast. So the biggest thing that can happen for me is the advocacy. I need my dog to trust me, even if it's scared of everything else in the world. I need them to be like, well, I'm scared of everything, but this guy's never steered me wrong. So that's a big one, right? You're going to get a dog who learns, hey, I can't trust my person, which is just really tough, right? That's going to create all kinds of issues. Also, you're going to there's a good chance the dog gets put in a situation where something bad happens, right? So you expose the dog too soon and the dog tries to run, can't, and maybe you as the handler gets tagged, right? Because the dog is learning, I have no other option and nobody's helping me through this and I'm not being guided and I can't get away and I can't get that dog. So I'm overstimulated and I'm going to redirect. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, right? There's a lot of things that go wrong. At best case scenario, the dog learns nothing and reinforces bad behaviors, right? That's best case scenario if we're not properly counter conditioning them in those moments. So at best, you're going to take a step back. At worst, you're going to tumble back down the hill. So again, not everything about dog training. In fact, a lot about dog training is not intuitive. It's not something that as humans we think, oh, I'm gonna protect this dog this way, and it doesn't work that way. In fact, they need sometimes things that aren't intuitive. And to touch a little bit on what Ray said when he was talking about shielding them in the wrong way, you get what you pet. Whatever you reinforce in that moment, or whatever you're petting in that moment, you're not just saying, hey, it's okay, buddy. You're saying it's okay to feel like this. And you're going to get a lot of that, especially when you see those people who just like sit next to their cowering dog, expose them and just pet them and say it's okay. You're just telling them, yeah, feel this way. So if, like I said, best case scenario, you're not going to make any progress. Worst case scenario, you really stumble backwards.
Yeah. Now, can the all fearful dogs be cured? Cured?
No, right? Not cured completely. So like there are genetic fearfulness. There's like a anxiety that can kind of exacerbate that fearfulness that's genetic. So there are some dogs out there that are just going to be kind of fearful, right? It doesn't mean that they can't be successful, though. It doesn't mean we can't guide them through things, right? And still be successful. But the dog may always have some fearfulness. That's just who that dog may be. On the other hand, though, there's plenty of fearfulness that is a learned behavior. If your dog's only fearful because of bad experiences, and you're super consistent and you follow your trainer's advice and create clear communication and you understand the thresholds for your dog's triggers and you can work them at the appropriate distance and around that, then yes, I've seen plenty of dogs go from very fearful to very confident because of simple communication and guidance and leadership and things like that. So, it really depends on the dog. But any fearful dog, I don't care if it's, genetically fearful coupled with learned experiences and all that, you can absolutely create a better life for the dog. But no, not every dog can be cured of fearfulness.
Which is a really good segue into all of the myths that we hear out there. Let's talk about some myths surrounding fearful dogs and training. Starting with it's all in how you raise them. How many times have we all heard that? So I'm going to flip this one back over to you, Damian.
Yeah, so sure, a dog can learn fearfulness if there are some things about the way it's raised that may cause some fearfulness, right? But in no way like that really makes people who have tried really hard and done the right things and still have a fearful dog feel like they're failing, right? They're like, well, if it's all in the way you raised them, I must have messed up. And that's not great, right? That makes people feel like they've failed when they really haven't. So it's not all in how you raise them. Yes, how you raise them is important, but there's nature and there's nurture, right? So there are dogs that are just born fearful, or there are dogs that are at the very least have like a are predisposition to be afraid. So don't feel like just because you might be doing a lot of things right and your dog may still be fearful. And the main cause of that is because we can't, just like Ray touched on, we can't clearly communicate, right? Think about the stress that's caused when you can't communicate with somebody, right? When you don't know exactly what's going on because the communication isn't clear. You start to get stressed about it. You start to feel unsure about it. Clear communication, being able to say, like, when your dog truly understands what you want from them, is going to help a ton with that. So it's not just how you raise them, that's for sure. Another big myth I think I see is that, like, oh my goodness, this dog has had a rough life and it's scared, and I'm going to shield it from everything. This dog will, and that's impossible. Everything in life is pressure to a dog. And what I mean by that is there's spatial pressure, there's body pressure, there's social pressure, there's physical pressure with leashes, there's all these different things. You're not going to protect that dog, or shield that dog from them. And when it does happen, it has no coping mechanism. It has no idea how to handle that stress, that pressure, and that fear. And so that's one of the worst things you can do. Again, on the extreme side of either one, overexposure with no work or just shielding them is the worst thing you can do. In fact, as the leader, as the owner, we have to make the difficult choice of being like, hey, this is going to be tough, and I'm going to have to stress and pressure my dog appropriately so that they can build confidence. But that's what we take on as leaders, right? Sometimes to do the right thing, it's not always the easy thing. And so it's really important, like, hey, this is tough on me, but forget about me. I'm thinking about my dog. So you really got to be like, I'm going to take on that stress and pressure of trying to build them through what they're afraid of. And I think that's really important. And when you realize that that's harder and more important, and I don't have kids, but I imagine that's a little bit like parenting, right? Like, hey, I know you don't like this, and it'd be really easy to let you do what you want, but I know what's best, and I'm going to structure this. It's the same concept in theory. Is like, you don't know what's best for you, dog. I do, and though this kind of is rough, I'm gonna take that on, and I'm gonna work you through it.
Talk to me a little bit about positive only trainers and their approach to dealing with fearful dogs. And I've heard it thrown around a lot that if we're strict with all these structure that we're putting in place, will ruin our relationship with our dogs and things like that. Could you just talk to me a little bit about kind of the major divide in, I guess, methodology out there?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, when a dog's fearful, they, even if you've got them in a place where they're not, shut down and are going to run away, but they are scared. They are it's hard to find a dog at that point that's going to take a reward, right? A positive reinforcement anyway. So it's like, okay, how are we going to reinforce it? Even if you could, even if that dog's going to take the food, but it's in a fearful state, it is more than likely just going to reinforce that to some degree. Also, when that dog does bail, decides to say, hey, I can't handle this anymore, it's going to get to reinforce that because we have no recourse. So when the dog decides, this is too much, I have no way of dealing with this, and runs, well, it's going to rehearse that behavior. So I think that's a really big point. The major one for me, and this goes for like overstimulated dogs, aggressive dogs that are like really amped up, really fearful dogs. When you think of a full cup, this dog's cup is full. You've got a full cup of water. What happens when you add something? If you add ice to that water, what happens? It overflows. So when you add positive, when I say positive, I mean add something. When you add things to a dog that is already up here, when their cup is already full, it's going to overflow. And that could be positive reinforcement, and that could be positive punishment. When you add something to that, it overflows. We need to dump some of that water out, and that's where I like negative reinforcement, right? That dog may not take a treat, but it understands release of pressure. And that is a way that you can bring that dog down. You can dump out some of that water so that then you can add something in. And I think that's a big one. That's the huge part of a positive or a positive only trainer that they miss out on. If your dog can't handle adding something, they have no recourse. What they're going to do is just take that dog away. They say, we can't be successful here. Or they're going to say, hey, here's the limit we've reached, so let's medicate the dog. So we don't want to limit those things. We want to use every tool. Like if your doctor came in and said, I don't believe in this part of medicine, I only use this, you'd be like, well, that doesn't sound right. I need you to have the whole gamut here and be able to like pick and choose what's appropriate for me. And I feel the same way with dogs. Not every dog needs every bit of the positive, negative reinforcement, all that stuff. They don't need all of that. Some of them do. Why limit yourself?
So how about the relationship part? Like when they're told that if you put too much structure in place, is this going to ruin your relationship with your dog? If I set my dog away to you, is he going to come back not liking me because he went to boot camp?
Not at all. Yeah. If anything, your relationship's going to be stronger because love is not enough, right? You can't love these problems away. Love is there. The moment you picked up your puppy, you probably love that dog immediately. And that's great. That's what's wonderful about dogs. But it's not enough. And that's true of people, right? If somebody has an issue, you can't love it away. If you really love them, then you look for the proper solution. And maybe that's difficult. Maybe that's challenging. It's more almost guaranteed to be more challenging on the owner than it is going to be on the dog. And so it's not going to ruin your relationship. When you have respect and communication along with love, that's great. What do we call love without communication and respect between people? We call it toxic. And that's what it is, right? And I've seen so many toxic relationships between people and dogs. I've had I've not always been a dog trainer. I look back at some of my other dogs. I'm like, oh yeah, we were like codependent in a weird way. And like back when my early 20s, when I had my German Shepherd and I didn't know what I was doing. And I look back and I'm like, I kind of limited that dog's life because I wasn't willing to make these changes or didn't understand. It wasn't that I wasn't willing. I just didn't understand. So love is not enough. And if anything, it's only when you have communication and respect and your dog looks to you as a leader, that is the best feeling. When your dog's feeling nervous and you look down and your dog checks in with you, you're telling me that's not like the ultimate relationship where your dog's like, I'm scared. What do I do, buddy? And you tell them, hey, I got you. Here's what you're going to do. If anything, it just builds a relationship.
Well, that wasn't a mic drop moment for, I don't know that we can add anything else. That was phenomenal, that answer. So yeah, we're going to wrap it up on that. I hope that everybody enjoyed this. I had a personal investment in this one. As I said, our dog Luna was a very fearful dog genetically. And she lived an amazing life thanks to proper training. So if you have a fearful dog, please look us up. We can absolutely help you and your dog. KoruK9.com, all of the social platforms at Koru K9, and we will be back again very soon. Thanks, everybody.